The girl had always lived in a world that was quiet in ways most people could not imagine. Sounds, voices, laughter, music. All of these were things she could see in the world but not hear. She grew up noticing the vibrations in the floor, the gentle shakes when someone walked past, the way her own heartbeat seemed to have its own rhythm that no one else could notice. Her family often spoke around her, thinking she understood more than she could, and teachers would sometimes forget she could not hear. It was a world of guesses and observation, a world where she learned to read lips and watch gestures with great care. Despite all of this, she seemed to always have a kind of quiet confidence, a sense that she was listening in her own way. Her earliest memories were filled with curiosity. When she was very young, she would sit by the piano in her living room and watch her older siblings press the keys. The piano was a large, dark wood instrument that seemed almost alive in the room, commanding attention even when no one played it. She had never heard music, but she felt it. She could feel the vibrations through the floorboards, through her fingers when she brushed lightly over the keys. It was not the same as hearing, but it was something that made her heart race and her mind fill with images she could not explain. She tried, at first, to copy what she saw. She would tap keys in no particular order, pressing them softly and then harder, listening to the vibrations beneath her hands and feet. Her parents watched her curiously. Sometimes they would smile, thinking it was a simple game, but other times they noticed how focused she was, how she seemed to study the movement of her fingers as if she were learning to speak a new language. They had no idea that the piano was not just a toy to her. It was the first thing that felt like it belonged to her, the first thing in the world that she could explore in a way no one else could understand. In school, life was different. Children shouted, laughed, and called to one another, and she had to watch closely to keep up. Teachers would sometimes get frustrated, thinking she wasn't paying attention. But she was. She was just learning to see the world in a different way, to notice things others ignored. She could read lips with ease, understand emotions from gestures, and observe patterns in speech. This made her quiet, but it also made her thoughtful. She was always thinking, always planning her next move. Music, she realized, could become her language, the way she spoke to the world when words were not enough. Her first real encounter with the piano as an instrument of expression came when she was about 7. Her parents had enrolled her in lessons with a local teacher who specialized in beginners. On the first day, she sat on the piano bench, her small hands hovering above the keys, unsure how to begin. The teacher played a simple melody and asked her to follow along. She couldn't hear it, but she could feel the movement, the rising and falling of the teacher's fingers. She tried to mimic the motion, pressing keys as the teacher had shown. First, it was awkward. Fingers stumbled, keys were pressed at the wrong time, and her hands did not always reach the right notes. But something remarkable happened. The teacher noticed her determination. Though she could not hear the notes, she was learning the patterns, the flow of the music, and the way the keys responded to pressure and touch. As the weeks passed, her practice grew more intentional. She learned to watch the teacher's hands closely, memorizing each movement. She learned to feel the vibrations through the piano bench, the way the wood resonated with each key. Slowly, she developed a method of her own. She counted rhythms in her head, felt the beats through her body, and learned to combine these sensations to play melodies that made sense. She was different from other students. While others relied on listening, she relied on touching, feeling, and observing. And somehow, her playing began to sound beautiful, even to someone who could hear it. There was a natural elegance to it, a delicacy that made people stop and listen. Her family began to notice small changes. She would play quietly at home, improvising on songs she had seen her siblings play. Sometimes, she would close her eyes and let her fingers move freely across the keys. When she did this, her parents noticed that there was an unusual emotion in her music, a depth that seemed to come from somewhere beyond simple practice. Her older siblings were often amazed, trying to mimic her movements, but they could not replicate the feeling. She was discovering a talent that was uniquely hers, a way of expressing herself in a language no one else could fully understand. School performances became a challenge. She was nervous about standing in front of people, worried that they would notice her inability to hear. But when she sat at the piano, something changed. The nerves faded, replaced by a quiet focus. She could feel the music flowing through her hands, through her arms, and into her fingers. She would close her eyes and let her body move naturally, counting rhythms in her mind and feeling the vibrations resonate beneath her. The audience, unaware of her hearing impairment, was often surprised by the precision and emotion in her playing. It was not perfect, but it was powerful, filled with life and energy. Teachers and classmates began to take notice. Some were skeptical at first, questioning whether someone who could not hear could truly play music. Others were amazed, watching her tiny fingers dance across the keys with confidence and grace. She did not mind the doubts. In fact, she seemed to thrive on them, determined to show that music was not just about listening but about feeling, understanding, and expressing. Her piano became her voice, a way to communicate the thoughts and emotions she could not express with words. At home, practice became a ritual. She would spend hours at the piano, exploring new melodies, learning new techniques, and creating songs from her imagination. Her parents watched silently, sometimes bringing small gifts or treats to encourage her, sometimes just sitting nearby, marveling at her focus. There were days of frustration, of course. Fingers would stumble, rhythms would be lost, and she would sometimes feel like giving up. But each time, she returned to the piano with renewed determination, driven by a love for the music she could not hear but could feel so deeply. The local community began to hear about her. Small concerts, school recitals, and neighborhood gatherings provided opportunities for her to perform. Audiences were often stunned by what they heard. There was a purity in her music, a sense that it came from a place beyond technical skill. It was emotional, moving, and powerful. People could feel the story in her playing, even if they did not know her personally. Word began to spread that a young girl who could not hear was creating music that touched the hearts of everyone who listened. Despite her growing recognition, she remained humble. She understood her limitations, but she also recognized her potential. She spent hours thinking about music, experimenting with different ways to feel rhythms and melodies. She learned to translate vibrations into notes, to anticipate harmonies, and to create patterns that made sense. Each day was a step forward, a step closer to something extraordinary. She did not see herself as different, only as someone who had to find a unique way to connect with the world. Her relationship with the piano was almost magical. It was not just an instrument but a companion, a friend, and a guide. She would talk to it silently, imagining stories and emotions that she wanted to express. She discovered that music could convey feelings that words could not capture, that it could connect people across boundaries, and that it could give voice to her inner world. The piano became the center of her life, a place where she felt understood, powerful, and alive. Friends and family sometimes struggled to understand how she could play without hearing. They would ask questions, sometimes out of curiosity, sometimes out of disbelief. She would simply smile, showing them that it was possible. Her playing was proof enough. Each note, each melody, each rhythm told the story of her perseverance, her creativity, and her extraordinary ability to overcome the challenges of the world around her. By the time she reached her early teens, it was clear that she was no ordinary student. Her talent was undeniable, and her passion was inspiring. People began to speak about her in the community, praising her dedication and the beauty of her music. Teachers who had once doubted her now marveled at her ability to learn, adapt, and create. Her peers began to look up to her, not just for her skill, but for her courage and determination. She was becoming a symbol of hope, showing that limitations were only obstacles to be overcome, not barriers to success. Her story was just beginning. The piano had opened a door to a world she could not hear but could feel in every fiber of her being. She had discovered a way to communicate, to express herself, and to inspire others. The quiet girl who once watched the world from the sidelines was now stepping into a space where her music could be heard, even if she could not hear it herself. The journey ahead would bring challenges, recognition, and moments of triumph. But for now, she sat at the piano, hands poised over the keys, ready to let her story unfold through the vibrations she felt deep in her heart. As she grew older, her bond with the piano grew stronger. Every day after school, she would rush home, drop her backpack, and go straight to the piano bench. She had learned to block out distractions and focus entirely on the instrument. For her, practice was not a chore. It was a conversation, a way to express feelings she could not put into words. She discovered that music was not just sound. It was motion, it was touch, it was emotion. Even though she could not hear, she could feel the rise and fall of notes in her fingertips and the vibrations through the floor beneath her feet. Her parents had started looking for a teacher who could help her develop her talent further. They finally found a local piano teacher who had experience with students who had special needs. The teacher was patient and curious, willing to adapt lessons for a child who could not hear. She began working with the girl, understanding that traditional teaching methods would not work. Instead, she used vibrations, visual cues, and demonstrations to show how music could be felt and not just heard. She would guide the girl's hands, helping her understand how much pressure to use, how to move her fingers, and how to feel the rhythm within her own body. The first lessons were challenging. The girl often felt frustrated because she could not rely on what everyone else took for granted: listening. She had to memorize everything through touch and observation. Sometimes, she would sit at the piano and stare at her hands, trying to imagine how a melody should feel. Other times, she would tap her fingers on the keys, feeling the vibrations in the wood, trying to match them to the pattern she had seen her teacher play. Each day brought small victories, little discoveries that encouraged her to keep going. She practiced for hours at home. She created a system for herself using vibrations, counting, and patterns. She learned to feel the difference between high and low notes, how chords moved together, and how melodies could flow even without sound. She found that she could anticipate musical phrases by watching the movement of her hands and imagining the pattern in her mind. Slowly, her improvisations became more complex, and her compositions began to take shape. Music was becoming a language she could speak fluently, even without hearing a single note. Her parents noticed that music had changed her in other ways too. She was more confident, more expressive, and more connected to the world around her. Even though she could not hear voices or sounds, she had learned to notice subtle details. The movement of leaves in the wind, the rhythm of footsteps on the pavement, the vibrations of passing cars. All of these things became part of her understanding of rhythm and tone. She began to realize that music existed everywhere, not just in the piano, and she could translate that world into her own compositions. At school, she began to stand out. Teachers noticed her focus, her determination, and her unusual ability to memorize and interpret musical patterns. Some students were curious, watching her hands on the piano with fascination. Others were skeptical, unsure how someone who could not hear could create music that sounded right to everyone else. She did not mind. She had learned long ago that the opinions of others mattered less than her own understanding of herself and her abilities. Her first small performances were at family gatherings and community events. She would sit at the piano, hands poised above the keys, and begin to play. At first, the melodies were simple, but even then, people noticed something extraordinary. There was an emotion in her playing that could not be explained. Friends and relatives would stop talking and just watch, amazed at the depth of feeling she conveyed through her movements. They could not believe that someone who could not hear could play with such expression, such life. Encouraged by these small successes, her teacher suggested entering a local youth piano competition. The idea made her nervous. She had never performed in front of strangers, and she worried about being judged. But she also felt excitement and curiosity. This was a chance to show the world what she had learned, to see if her music could connect with people outside her family. She agreed and began preparing with determination. Her practice sessions became more focused, with an emphasis on precision and emotional expression. Preparation was not easy. She had to memorize every note, every rhythm, every dynamic. She worked on her posture, the movement of her fingers, and the way her hands touched the keys. She also practiced imagining the sound of her music in her mind, translating the vibrations she felt into the patterns she wanted to express. Her teacher helped her break down complex pieces into manageable sections, guiding her through the hardest passages until she could play them confidently. She spent hours repeating sections, correcting mistakes, and refining her technique. It was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. The day of the competition arrived. She felt nervous as she walked onto the stage, glancing at the audience and the judges. She took a deep breath, sat at the piano, and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes and let her mind focus entirely on the music. She felt the vibrations, imagined the melodies, and let her fingers move naturally. The audience was silent, curious, unsure what to expect. And then she began to play. Her performance was unlike anything anyone had expected. Each note, each chord, each movement of her hands was filled with emotion. The music seemed to flow effortlessly, even though she could not hear it. People in the audience were captivated, leaning forward, watching as the girl who could not hear created sounds that were beautiful, moving, and powerful. Some whispered to each other in disbelief, while others sat with tears in their eyes, overwhelmed by the emotion her playing conveyed. She had taken the vibrations, the patterns, and the motion she felt, and turned them into something extraordinary. After she finished, there was a long moment of silence. Then, slowly, applause began, growing louder and louder until the entire room was clapping and cheering. She opened her eyes, feeling both relief and joy. She had done it. She had connected with the audience, shown them her talent, and expressed her emotions in a way words could not capture. Her parents were crying, her teacher smiling proudly, and even other competitors looked on with awe. It was a moment that would stay with her forever. The judges were equally impressed. They approached her after the performance, praising her skill, her dedication, and her unique ability to create music despite her hearing impairment. Some asked how she learned to play so well without hearing. She explained her methods, the vibrations, the patterns, and the feeling she relied on. They listened intently, fascinated by her approach and inspired by her perseverance. She realized in that moment that her journey was not just about music. It was about determination, creativity, and the human spirit. Word of her talent began to spread beyond her school and community. Local newspapers wrote about her performance, and small television programs featured her story. People were inspired not just by her music, but by her courage and dedication. Messages of support and admiration poured in from strangers, many of whom had their own challenges to overcome. She had become more than a student or a musician. She had become a symbol of what was possible when someone refused to give up. Even with this growing recognition, she remained focused on her own progress. She continued to practice every day, exploring new pieces, refining her technique, and experimenting with her own compositions. She loved creating music from her imagination, finding ways to express feelings that were too complex for words. Each day at the piano was an adventure, a chance to discover something new about herself and the world around her. Her teacher encouraged her to keep pushing boundaries, to try more challenging pieces, and to trust in her own abilities. Through this process, she also learned about patience and resilience. Some days were frustrating, when mistakes seemed impossible to correct or progress felt slow. Other days were filled with joy, when a piece came together perfectly or she discovered a new melody that moved her deeply. She learned to accept both the struggles and the triumphs, understanding that growth came from consistent effort and persistence. The piano was teaching her lessons that extended far beyond music, shaping her character and her outlook on life. By the end of this stage in her journey, she had grown not only as a pianist but as a person. She had discovered the power of determination, the importance of creativity, and the ability to communicate through more than words. Music had become her way of connecting with the world, of expressing what she felt inside, and of inspiring others. She had faced challenges that might have stopped someone else, yet she had turned those obstacles into opportunities, showing that talent and dedication could overcome even the most daunting limitations. Her story was only beginning, but part 2 of her journey had set the stage for greater achievements. She had discovered how to harness her unique abilities, overcome doubts, and connect with people in profound ways. The foundation she had built through practice, perseverance, and guidance would carry her forward, preparing her for even greater challenges and unforgettable performances that would leave everyone around her in awe. She's sitting backstage, hands hovering above the piano keys, feeling the vibrations from the stage floor. The auditorium is crowded, filled with people she cannot hear. She cannot hear the applause, the whispers, or the rustle of programs, but she senses the anticipation. Every performer has a certain energy before going on, and even though she cannot hear, she can feel it. Her teacher gives her a small nod, a quiet reassurance, and she takes a deep breath, steadying herself. The moment she sits at the piano bench, everything else falls away. The lights, the crowd, the judges, they blur into the background. She focuses on the keys, her fingers poised to translate the melodies she has imagined for days, weeks, even months. She begins with a simple touch, pressing keys lightly, feeling the vibrations run through her arms and into her body. She counts silently in her head, the rhythm steady and precise. It is more than playing notes. It is expressing a story, a message that only she can fully understand. Her first note resonates through the piano, a vibration she feels in her chest. She closes her eyes, letting her hands move naturally, flowing from one chord to the next. Each movement is deliberate, shaped by countless hours of practice. She anticipates each beat, each rise and fall, each pause that gives the music life. It is a dialogue between her and the piano, a conversation that has no words but is full of meaning. The audience watches in silence. They can hear the music, but they do not yet know the story behind it. Slowly, they begin to notice the extraordinary precision of her movements, the way her fingers glide across the keys. There is a grace in her playing that is uncommon even among seasoned performers. Some lean forward, trying to understand how a girl who cannot hear can create such beauty. Others exchange quiet whispers, expressions of disbelief and admiration crossing their faces. As she continues, she becomes more confident. The vibrations guide her. The rhythm inside her body keeps her steady, and her imagination colors the music with emotion. She does not think about the audience. She thinks about the story she wants to tell. Each chord, each phrase, each delicate touch is part of a larger tapestry she has created in her mind. The piano is no longer an instrument. It is a voice, a way for her to speak to the world without using words. Backstage, her teacher watches with pride. Every lesson, every hour of practice, every moment of struggle has led to this performance. She knows the girl has faced more challenges than most musicians ever will, and yet here she is, expressing something beyond technique, beyond theory, beyond sound. The teacher can feel the emotion in the room, a mix of awe and wonder, as the audience slowly begins to respond. Though the girl cannot hear, her music is touching hearts and minds. Midway through the performance, she reaches a complex section of the piece. The keys require precision, timing, and subtlety. She feels the vibrations more intensely now, her whole body attuned to the piano. Her fingers move with purpose, each note a brushstroke painting the scene she envisions. In her mind, the music rises and falls like waves, the melody intertwining with the rhythm she imagines. Even though she cannot hear the sound, she senses the harmony and the flow, guiding herself through the challenging passages. The audience begins to shift in their seats, caught in the spell of her music. They can feel the intensity, the emotional depth, and the delicate control she has over each note. Some close their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others watch her hands with fascination, marveling at the precision and elegance. She is telling a story without words, expressing emotion without speech, and everyone present is captivated by the invisible thread connecting her to the piano. When she moves into the final section, she allows herself to fully inhabit the music. Her hands glide effortlessly, her fingers dancing across the keys, her body moving in rhythm with the vibrations she feels. The audience is silent, but the energy in the room is palpable. It is as if everyone collectively holds their breath, waiting for the final note, anticipating the culmination of a performance that is both extraordinary and deeply human. As her final note resonates, a stillness fills the auditorium. Then, slowly, the audience begins to clap. It starts as a few hesitant hands, then grows louder and stronger, filling the room with sound that she cannot hear. She feels the vibrations of the applause through the floor and the piano bench, a physical acknowledgement of what she has created. She opens her eyes, a quiet smile on her face, feeling the energy and admiration of the people around her. The judges approach, their expressions a mixture of surprise and respect. They ask questions, wanting to know how she achieved such mastery without hearing. She explains her methods, how she counts rhythms internally, how she feels the vibrations, how she translates movement into music. They listen intently, amazed by her ingenuity, determination, and creativity. They recognize that what she has accomplished is more than skill. It is a testament to resilience, intelligence, and emotional expression. Backstage, her parents rushed to her side, tears streaming down their faces. They had always believed in her, supported her, and encouraged her to pursue her passion. But seeing her perform in front of an audience for the first time fills them with a mix of pride and awe. They hug her tightly, whispering words of praise and love. The girl smiles, her heart full, not because of the applause, but because she has shared her world with others, even without sound. Her teacher congratulates her, praising her focus, her creativity, and her ability to connect with the music on a level that most people never reach. She tells the girl that this performance is only the beginning, that her talent and determination will take her further than she can imagine. The girl feels a quiet excitement, realizing that music has opened doors she had never thought possible, that her journey has only just begun. In the days following the performance, word spreads. People talk about the girl who could not hear but played the piano with such beauty and emotion that it left everyone in awe. Articles are written, interviews conducted, and local news stations feature her story. She receives letters and messages from other children with disabilities, people inspired by her courage and talent. They see in her a reflection of their own dreams, their own struggles, and their own possibilities. Despite the attention, she remains humble and focused. She continues to practice daily, exploring new pieces, creating her own compositions, and refining her technique. She is always learning, always growing, always striving to express more, to tell more stories through the piano. Music has become a part of her identity, a companion that guides her, challenges her, and allows her to communicate with the world in a way words never could. Her performances continue, each one more confident than the last. She begins to play in larger venues in front of more people, always feeling the same mixture of excitement and focus. Each audience is a new opportunity to connect, to share her vision, and to inspire. She learns that music has the power to break barriers, to transcend limitations, and to touch hearts regardless of background, age, or ability. In her private moments, she reflects on her journey. She remembers the early days of frustration, the doubts, the obstacles, and the moments of triumph that shaped her path. She understands that her success is not just about talent. It is about persistence, creativity, and the courage to continue despite challenges. The piano is her teacher, her friend, her voice, and her way of experiencing the world. It has given her a purpose, a connection, and a sense of self that is deeper than any applause or recognition. As she looks ahead, she knows that greater challenges await. Competitions, performances, and opportunities will test her skill, her focus, and her resilience. But she is ready. She has learned to trust herself, to feel the music in her body, and to express what she cannot hear. Each note she plays is a testament to her determination, her creativity, and her extraordinary ability to turn limitations into strength. Her story is no longer just about a girl who cannot hear. It is about courage, perseverance, and the power of the human spirit. She has shown that obstacles can be transformed into opportunities, that challenges can inspire growth, and that music is not just about sound, but about feeling, emotion, and connection. She continues to play, to explore, and to inspire, leaving everyone who listens in awe of what she can achieve, not in spite of her limitations, but because of the unique perspective and determination they have helped her develop. By the time she was 14, she had begun to gain recognition far beyond her school and local community. People were curious about her talent, intrigued by how a girl who could not hear could play the piano with such precision and emotion. Invitations arrived for performances in larger venues, sometimes with formal competitions and audiences she had never imagined. Each invitation filled her with a mix of excitement and anxiety. She knew the stakes were higher, the challenges greater, and the expectations heavier. Yet she also knew that music had become her way of speaking, and she was ready to share her story again, through the piano. Her teacher guided her through preparation for one of the most important competitions she had ever faced. This event was renowned for its difficult repertoire and demanding judges, some of whom were skeptical of young performers, let alone someone who could not hear. The girl's training intensified. She practiced from morning until evening, breaking down complicated pieces into small segments, memorizing every chord and every rhythm. She focused not just on accuracy, but on expression, ensuring that each note conveyed the emotion she intended. The pressure was immense, but she thrived under it, finding strength in her unique connection to the piano. She began to encounter competitors and audiences who did not understand her. Some whispered behind her back, doubting that a girl who could not hear could perform at such a level. Others were openly dismissive, assuming she would fail. She heard none of this directly, of course, but she sensed it in the attitudes around her, in the curious glances and occasional condescending smiles. Instead of letting it discourage her, she used it as motivation. She wanted to prove not to them, but to herself, that her dedication and talent could overcome any doubt. The day of the competition arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation, with parents, judges, and young musicians filling every seat. She waited backstage, feeling the familiar vibrations beneath her feet and through the piano bench. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, centering herself. She reminded herself that her preparation was complete, that she had practiced tirelessly, and that the music flowed through her in ways no one else could understand. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage, her fingers brushing the keys lightly before she sat down. She felt the vibrations, felt the rhythm pulse through her arms, and began to play. From the first notes, it was clear that something extraordinary was happening. Each movement was deliberate, each chord carefully balanced, and the music conveyed a depth of feeling that transcended technical skill. Even though she could not hear, she could feel the dynamics, the rise and fall of phrases, and the emotional weight of each passage. The audience, initially skeptical, became captivated. They watched her small hands move across the keys with precision and grace. Her fingers danced effortlessly, following patterns she had memorized and rhythms she had internalized. There was a confidence in her posture, a clarity in her motions, and a depth in her expression that made every note resonate with those who listened. People whispered to each other, astonished that a young girl could evoke such strong emotion without hearing a single note. Midway through the performance, the piece reached a particularly challenging section. It demanded exact timing, delicate phrasing, and a subtle touch that would challenge even seasoned pianists. She felt the vibrations more intensely now, her entire body attuned to the piano. She allowed herself to be fully absorbed, translating the sensation into sound that the audience could hear. Each note, each chord, each pause was infused with emotion, a reflection of the countless hours of practice, patience, and determination that had brought her to this moment. The judges were taken aback. They leaned forward, carefully observing her technique, her expression, and the sheer control she had over the instrument. Some exchanged glances, recognizing that what they were witnessing was exceptional, not just because of her skill, but because of the way she had overcome a barrier that seemed insurmountable. It was not simply a performance. It was a revelation, a demonstration of what human resilience and creativity could achieve. When the final note lingered and faded, a moment of silence filled the auditorium. Then, applause erupted. The sound was overwhelming, filling the room with energy that she could feel through the floor and through the piano bench. She opened her eyes and allowed herself a quiet smile, sensing the audience's awe and admiration. Her parents, sitting in the front row, were visibly moved, tears streaming down their faces. Her teacher beamed with pride, knowing that this was a defining moment in the girl's journey. After the performance, she was approached by fellow competitors, some curious, some admiring. They asked how she managed to play with such emotion and accuracy despite her inability to hear. She explained her methods: feeling vibrations, counting rhythms internally, memorizing patterns, and relying on intuition and muscle memory. They listened intently, inspired by her ingenuity and determination. Her performance became a story that people would share for years, not just for the technical skill she displayed, but for the courage and creativity she had shown. The competition awarded her top honors, recognizing not just her ability to play, but her extraordinary approach to music. Judges praised her technical precision, her emotional depth, and the unique way she connected with the piano. Her achievement sent a message to the world: limitations do not define a person's potential. The applause and accolades were rewarding, but the girl valued most the personal satisfaction of knowing she had given her best and expressed herself fully through music. Following the competition, invitations came from more prestigious venues and programs. She was asked to perform for audiences she had never imagined, including professional musicians, music schools, and community organizations that celebrated extraordinary talent. Each opportunity brought new challenges, including more complex pieces, larger audiences, and higher expectations. But she faced each one with the same determination, focusing on the music itself and the emotions she wanted to convey. Her story began to inspire others. People with disabilities reached out to her, sharing their struggles and dreams, saying that she gave them hope. Teachers and musicians marveled at her methods, eager to learn from her approach. Families encouraged their children to explore music, pointing to her example as proof that talent and perseverance could overcome obstacles. She had become more than a pianist. She was a symbol of determination, creativity, and the human spirit. Despite the growing recognition, she remained humble. She continued to practice for hours each day, exploring new pieces, refining her technique, and experimenting with her own compositions. She understood that mastery required constant effort and that every performance was a learning experience. She also recognized the importance of her teacher, her family, and her own inner drive, knowing that support and guidance were essential to her continued growth. Her private moments at the piano remained sacred. She would close her eyes, allow the vibrations to guide her, and lose herself in the music. It was in these moments that she found peace, clarity, and joy. Music had become a companion, a mentor, and a voice that could express what words could not. She learned to cherish these moments, understanding that her connection with the piano was more than talent. It was a reflection of her identity, her perseverance, and her capacity to overcome. As she looked toward the future, she understood that the journey would continue to be challenging. Competitions, performances, and opportunities would test her skill, focus, and creativity. But she also knew that she was capable, that she had faced and overcome significant obstacles before, and that music would always be her guide. Each note she played, each piece she performed, was a step forward, a chance to inspire, and a way to share her unique perspective with the world. Her story, as it unfolded in these years, was no longer just about a girl who could not hear. It was about courage, resilience, and the power of passion and determination. She had shown that limitations could be transformed into strengths, that challenges could spark creativity, and that human potential is boundless when paired with dedication and love for what one does. Her journey continued, a testament to the extraordinary possibilities that arise when talent meets perseverance, and she remained an inspiration to all who encountered her music. The girl had come a long way from the small room in her house where she first explored the piano as a child. Now, she stood on a stage that seemed enormous compared to the living room where she had first pressed the keys. The lights were bright, the audience vast, but she felt calm. The piano beneath her fingers was familiar, almost like an old friend. She could not hear the sounds it produced, but she felt every vibration, every pulse of energy that ran through the instrument and into her body. Each note was a conversation, each chord a story she wanted to share. Her journey had not been easy. Along the way, she had faced doubt, skepticism, and sometimes even ridicule. Some people could not imagine how a girl who could not hear could play music, let alone perform it with emotion and skill. She had learned to ignore the negative comments and focus on what she could control: her practice, her technique, and her connection to the piano. She had discovered that music was not just sound. It was feeling, expression, and communication. The limitations others saw became the fuel for her creativity and determination. As she prepared for this final performance, she thought back to the first time she had truly felt music. She remembered sitting at the piano, fingertips brushing the keys, feeling vibrations pulse through her small hands. She remembered the frustration, the mistakes, and the hours of practice that sometimes seemed endless. She remembered the joy of discovery, the excitement of creating something that felt alive even if no one else could hear it. Those early experiences had shaped her, giving her the tools to become the musician she was now. Her teacher had been by her side through it all, guiding her, encouraging her, and helping her develop methods that worked for her unique abilities. Together, they had found ways to teach her rhythm, melody, and harmony without relying on hearing. The teacher had taught her to feel the music through vibrations, to count rhythms internally, and to translate motion into sound. The bond they shared was more than teacher and student. It was a partnership built on trust, respect, and a shared love of music. Backstage, the air was filled with anticipation. She took a deep breath and sat at the piano bench, hands poised above the keys. She felt the vibrations through the floor, the energy of the audience, and the pulse of her own heart. She closed her eyes and let herself focus entirely on the music. She remembered the countless hours of practice, the lessons, the small victories, and the setbacks that had taught her resilience. She reminded herself that this performance was not just for the audience. It was for her, a culmination of everything she had worked for, a celebration of her journey. The first notes resonated beneath her fingers, vibrations she could feel and interpret. She moved through the piece with confidence, her hands gliding across the keys, translating emotion into music. Each phrase was deliberate, each pause meaningful. She felt the music flow through her, guiding her movements and shaping the story she wanted to tell. The audience watched in awe, captivated by the precision, elegance, and depth of feeling in her performance. They did not know the full extent of her journey, but they could sense the extraordinary dedication behind every note. Midway through the performance, she reached a section that required subtlety and control. Her fingers moved with exactness, guided by the internal rhythm she had developed over years of practice. She allowed herself to become completely absorbed in the music, letting it flow through her without conscious thought. She had learned to trust her instincts, to rely on the connection between her body and the piano. Every chord, every melodic line, and every dynamic shift was part of a narrative she had created, a story of perseverance and triumph. The audience was silent, completely absorbed in her playing. They could see the concentration in her expression, the grace in her movements, and the power behind each note. Some were moved to tears, others leaned forward in admiration, and all were aware that they were witnessing something rare and extraordinary. She had taken what many would consider a limitation and turned it into a source of strength, creating music that was not just heard but felt deeply. As she played the final section, she felt a sense of completion. The vibrations through the piano and floor seemed to resonate with her heartbeat, creating a perfect union of motion and feeling. Her hands moved naturally, guided by muscle memory and intuition, each note expressing the journey she had traveled. The audience could feel the emotion, the depth, and the story she was conveying. They were silent, holding their breath, as if afraid to disturb the magic unfolding before them. When the last note faded, a hush filled the room. Then, slowly, applause erupted, growing louder and stronger until it filled the auditorium. Though she could not hear the sound, She felt it through the vibrations in the floor and piano bench. She opened her eyes and saw the audience rising, clapping, and cheering. Her parents were in the front row, tears streaming down their faces, proud beyond words. Her teacher smiled, proud and emotional, knowing that this performance represented years of hard work, dedication, and belief in her abilities. After the performance, she was approached by judges, musicians, and audience members, all wanting to know how she had achieved such mastery despite her hearing impairment. She explained her methods, the importance of vibrations, the internal counting of rhythms, and the reliance on touch and observation. People listened with fascination and respect, recognizing that her approach was not just a workaround but a unique way of connecting with music. She had found a method that allowed her to express herself fully, to share her story, and to inspire others. Her story began to reach a wider audience. Articles were written, interviews were conducted, and her performances were featured on television and social media. People were inspired not just by her talent, but by her courage and determination. Children with disabilities saw a reflection of their own potential, and adults were reminded that obstacles can be transformed into opportunities. She became a symbol of resilience, creativity, and the power of the human spirit. Despite the attention and accolades, she remained focused on her music. She continued to practice every day, exploring new pieces, creating her own compositions, and refining her technique. She understood that learning was a lifelong journey and that every performance was an opportunity to grow. Her connection with the piano remained personal and profound, a source of joy, expression, and comfort. Music had become her voice, her companion, and her way of connecting with the world. In her quiet moments, she reflected on her journey. She remembered the early struggles, the hours of practice, the moments of doubt, and the triumphs that had shaped her path. She understood that her success was not simply about talent, but about perseverance, creativity, and belief in herself. She realized that the challenges she had faced had made her stronger, more determined, and more capable of inspiring others. Every note she played was a testament to her journey, a reflection of her dedication, and a celebration of her unique perspective. Looking to the future, she felt excitement and anticipation. More performances, more challenges, and more opportunities awaited her. She was ready to face them with the same focus, determination, and love for music that had carried her this far. She understood that her path would not always be easy, but she also knew that the piano would always be there to guide her, to help her express herself, and to connect with others in ways that words could never achieve. Her story, now fully unfolding, was about more than a girl who could not hear. It was about courage, resilience, and the extraordinary potential that lies within each person. She had turned what others might see as a limitation into a source of strength, using it to create beauty, inspire others, and leave a lasting impact. She had shown that passion, determination, and creativity could overcome obstacles, and that music could be a bridge connecting hearts and minds. As she stepped off the stage that day, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had shared her journey, her talent, and her story with the world. She had touched lives, inspired others, and proven that limitations do not define what is possible. She walked away from the piano with a quiet confidence, knowing that the journey would continue, that the music would never end, and that her story would continue to inspire anyone willing to listen with their hearts.